His death, aged 69, was announced yesterday, and I'm joined by another radio legend, the critic Gillian Reynolds, to pay tribute. Gillian, hello. Just tell me, what defined Steve's sound, do you think?
I think the fact that he loved radio. You know, I can't think of him as gone, actually. I think he's probably running the radio station of the clouds by now. But I said, he must have grown up with radio, his parents listening to it. And, you know, being born in 1957, television still wasn't very big. There was no commercial radio in this country. He grew up in a really interesting time when radio was a world you could escape into, where you had a personal relationship with the person who was presenting, like, you know, Jack Jackson, say, or Pete Murray. Pete Murray used to be on Luxembourg in those days. And at the same time, you know other people are listening. So you're kind of in a gang, but you're in a special relationship with the gang leader. And it's the magic of radio. It persists, that feeling. You know, I feel I know you. We never met until this minute, but I know you because I listen to you.
Absolutely, and I love that idea of the radio station of the clouds. But for those of us who can't hear that, for all of us who can't hear that, let's have a listen to Steve Wright, Not in the Clouds.
Continuous recording will now start.
All right, now just after 2
On your
o'clock, we have got a
smartphone,
lot of
connect
stuff.
to a Wi-Fi
We will tell you
network.
about
Name
a
starts
marriage
with
where the
Thinkware.
groom is 103 years old and the
GPS
bride
connected.
is 107. Yes.
Leon FM.
Whistler, hello. I read the best book of my life the other day. Did you? Shadow the Sheep, dog by Edith Blyton. He really is a clever dog, all fluffy and smashing. Yeah. He runs around barking all the time, jumping up people and licking them, carrying home his master's shopping in his mouth, and sometimes he even nips a postman.
Does he?
Wish he would nip a few estate agents.
Julie Barnes in Spain. Steve, can you say happy birthday to my lovely husband Dave, as it's his birthday on Valentine's Day? Dave's been my rock through lots of ups and downs. We listen every Sunday from the mountain village of Canillas de Aquino in Andalusia. Yeah, you can tell that I know that very well. I know the whole area.
Brilliant. I mean, we heard a few of those key Steve Wright ingredients there. Real life stories, surreal humour, and those sort of rather charming dedications he got known for, particularly in his Sunday love song slot. I mean, his shows, Gillian, have been described as having a distinctive zoo format. What does that actually mean?
Oh, it's a term grabbed from America. In America, it means, you know, you have a gang, and you will contribute bits to the boss's radio show. The boss stays in charge, but, you know, if you were in my gang, I'd have you on, and I'd shout at you a bit, and you'd shout back at me a bit, and then passers-by would come in, you know, people who are in town. So it feels
Speed
as if
camera
it's
in
unstructured.
300
It
yards.
feels as if it's all,
Speed
you
limit
know,
is
happening
30
out
miles
of the
per
blue in the
hour.
wild. Actually, it's all carefully arranged, and in this case, it would be pre-recorded, because he pre-recorded a lot of his shows.
Beautifully choreographed. I know you've been reading, well, I imagine you've been reading the obituaries today. He's clearly loved. What do you take away from them? Was he taken seriously?
Oh, he was taken very seriously. I mean, anyone who can rebuild a career twice, he built a career on Radio 1, left after a big fight with a new controller of Radio 1, went to Radio 2, scooted along a bit, and then when Jim Moyer became controller of Radio 2, Jim Moyer had this idea for him and placed him in the afternoon. And it's a really interesting place to be, because people always think it's the breakfast show that harnesses people. It's not. When you're dealing with a slightly older or female audience, the afternoon is your time. And it was a marriage, you know. He kind of married every one of his listeners, and he put on a show. It wasn't just, that is. It was a real show. He had his characters, he acted up, he, you know, laughed around, and you felt as if you were part of a special gang yourself. You know, you were in Steve's gang. It's a magic trick. Not everyone can do it. Loads of people try, but it usually sounds like, you know, they're sitting on an iceberg somewhere. But he never did. he could take you to the moon and beyond because you believed him.
Gillian Reynolds, thank you so much for helping us pay tribute to Steve Wright on the media show today. Now, it may have all started with a mouse, Mickey Mouse to be precise, but 100 years on, right now, the Walt Disney Company is focused on the world of gaming. It's spending $1.5 billion for a stake in Epic Games, the company behind Fortnite. Takara Small, a tech columnist for CBC in Canada, is here to explain why. Takara, hello, just tell us what's been announced.
Yes, I mean, it's a major deal. Disney has decided to invest in Fortnite, an online video game platform, for a little over $1.1 billion. It's quite massive, and I think this is about, as we all know it, recognizing that it's a way to reach a new generation. It's the next step in its evolution. Marvel, as though everyone loves it, is not going to pay the bills forever, and they need to recognize that in order to reach and expand to a new consumer set, they have to go beyond just TV and movies.
And do we have any sense of what it will mean for players? What will they experience? I think they're talking about new games, but also an entertainment universe where consumers can interact with Disney, Star Wars, Marvel, and other characters. What will it actually look like?
And actually shop and purchase goods. I think that's an interesting aspect, because you have to remember with Fortnite, people can purchase outfit and skins. So can you imagine going to a Disney store and someone being able to buy something that's been created by a Fortnite creator? But I think the universe itself will encompass, concerts, events that will allow people to attend virtual attractions. It's an experience in of itself, and Disney has already partnered with Fortnite in the past. I mean, you've been able to play some Marvel characters before, but the idea this is going to be a long-time partnership, I think that's an opportunity for both, because there's less licensing fees, there's the ability for them to create unique characters, and I think export that into Disney's streaming platform, which again is a huge advantage.
You touched on this a little earlier, but I was struck by Bob Iger, the Disney CEO, who seems to have been quite taken with data showing quite how much time younger generations, Gen Alpha, Gen Z, and even millennials spend on gaming.
I mean, Fortnite launched in 2017, so for people my age, it's like a throwback to nostalgia. Some of like the major media that I actually came into contact with when I was young was through video games. And so the fact that you have young people, millennials, Gen Z, who are obsessed with video games, and that's how they approach the world, it makes sense that Disney would want to spend more money in this. I think it's also interesting that a lot of Hollywood tends to disregard gaming. I mean, we talk about Barbie a lot. It made a little bit over $1 billion, but Fortnite does that every year, double that every year. It is a massive engine. It's an economic engine in of itself. So the fact that Disney sees where the future is, and the fact that there's the Apple VR headset, which can expand its use even more, it's a win-win for both companies.
And I'm still trying to picture it as a non-Fortnite player, although I see it played in my house all the time by my kids. It's a virtual world, is it, that's being created that users will enter, but how does it compare with the metaverse, something that we've all heard more about?
Well, I think they're actually quite similar, and that's why I brought up the Apple VR headset, because the idea that you'll be able to create and play in a virtual world isn't that different from what Meta was trying to create on their own. Now, the visuals weren't the same. Obviously, it kind of crashed and burned. I'm sure people will probably send me hate mail about that. But the idea that Disney has decided to lay off part of their own, metaverse team and has decided to invest in Epic Games and Fortnite shows that this is the space that people will want to play in, and they're very similar in that they create virtual environments that people can live, interact, chat. It's perfect. And if I can add just very quickly, I think this is perfect for Disney's brand, because Fortnite is known for being cartoonish. It's bloodless. There's no gore. And Disney is seen as, everyone's childhood favorite brand. It makes sense.
Ken, Ben Smith from Semaphore, just in our last 30 seconds, the legacy media is going online, chasing these younger audiences. Just, this is another example of that, just as your story about Morgan perhaps is the same.
Yeah, I think from Disney's perspective, it's this idea of the metaverse, and that there will be these other
digital surfaces and places where you can extract more money from your consumers and build your brand. I think for them it's a bit of a hedge. I mean, you know, they make money 19 different ways, from cruises and theme parks and things like that. And this is, you know, one more place for them to kind of plant their, you know, Mickey Mouse flag. But it's not jumping in with both feet. It's you know, it's just one more part of their empire.
Okay.
One more outpost.
Well, thank you so much. That's all we've got time for. Mickey Mouse flag, media flag is time to be raised or put shut down, or whichever way around you do flags at the end of a programme. Anyway, thank you, all of you. Ben Smith from Semaphore, Jane Martinson, Gillian Reynolds, Takara Small and Evan Harris earlier. You can listen to other episodes of the Media Show on BBC Sounds. But that's it from us for now. Thank you so much for listening. Goodbye.
The Media Show was presented by Katie Razzle, the producer was Simon Richardson, and the studio engineer was David Evans. BBC Radio 4's Lent Talks for 2024. Lent is a season of penitence and self-examination. It challenges us to interrogate the weaker angels of our nature. 6 meditative moments, exploring doubt, human relationships and betrayal.
1,000,000% he is not a traitor. I don't know if I'm 100% certain of anything.
Personal reflections on faith and connection. Friendship is not sinful. It is famously one of the fundamentals of divine love. Radio 4's Lent Talks begin next Monday night at 11 on Radio 4 and BBC Sounds. It's 5 o'clock, time for PM with Evan Davis.
Hello there. Operation Steadfast Defender. NATO has embarked on its biggest military exercise in decades, just as its defence ministers have embarked on a concerted attempt to defend the purpose of the alliance itself. We hear from a former NATO Secretary General.
There is no threat as long as there is a deterrent. As long as we have unity and we have military capabilities, then there is no possibility of anybody invading any of the NATO territories.
Also on PM, the Labour leader is under pressure after suspending a second parliamentary candidate. We examine the relationship between the party and its Muslim voters. Conservative MP Tobias Ellwood's house was targeted by dozens of pro-Palestinian protesters. He tells us that kind of action could put people off becoming MPs.
Advertising the private address to mobilise an aggressive, intimidating rally at an MP's residential property, for me, is a step too far.
We'll have an update on the British Museum's operation to reclaim its stolen artefacts and Rage Against the Machine.
These cars represent technology taking the place of humans. People don't like the idea that a machine is going to take their jobs.
We hear the curious case of a self-driving car being set on fire by an angry group of pedestrians in San Francisco. But we'll start with the BBC News, read today by Chris Aldridge.
The president of the Palestinian Authority, Mahmoud Abbas, has urged Hamas to reach a deal for the release of Israeli hostages held in Gaza to avert a further disaster in the territory. Negotiations are taking place in Cairo, which could see an exchange deal for Palestinians held in Israeli jails. On the ground, Israel has ordered the evacuation of one of the last functioning hospitals in Gaza. Our correspondent Nick Beak reports from Jerusalem.
Nasser Hospital in the city of Khan Yunis is the largest medical centre in the south of the Gaza Strip. But in recent days, fighting has intensified around it, and doctors report that people have been killed by sniper fire. Now all civilians are being told to leave, although Israel says patients and doctors can remain. To the south, in Rafah, there are no imminent signs of Israel's promised operation to evacuate 1.5 million people ahead of a major assault on Hamas forces. Nor is there any sign of a breakthrough in talks to bring about a ceasefire.
The NATO's Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg says he expects the majority of the alliance's 31 members to meet their defence spending target this year. He acknowledged there was still a way to go before all allies spend the agreed minimum of 2% of their total economic output on defence every year. Labour has promised tighter screening of its prospective MPs as it deals with the fallout from comments made by its candidates about Israel's war against Hamas. The party has removed its backing from Azhar Ali in the Rochdale by-election and suspended Graham Jones, who's due to stand at the general election in nearby Hyndburn. Here's our political correspondent, Peter Saul.
After Labour pulled its support from Azhar Ali and suspended Graham Jones, there's intense scrutiny on the party's vetting process for potential MPs. The Shadow Defence Secretary John Healey told Today that there were strong checks in place. He argued that Sir Keir Starmer had kept his pledge to root out anti-Semitism, but acknowledged that not everyone in the party was a saint. The chair of the Jewish Labour movement, Mike Katz, called for any Labour members who were at the same meeting apparently attended by Mr Ali and Mr Jones to be suspended if they failed to call out the language used. The leader of the Labour group on Hyndburn Borough Council, Munsif Dad, who was there, has been spoken to by party officials but is still a member.
The Conservative MP Tobias Ellwood has told this programme a demonstration by pro-Palestinian campaigners
Good afternoon. I just arrived. Yeah, very close to in the Skinner Street. Yes, I'm at the back. Yeah, I'm gonna go to the subterranean parking. I don't know where is the shop. I never been on the front of the shop, never. But I will stop there somewhere and see if I can call your colleague, and he will show up somewhere. Yes, I'm at the red lights now. I'm gonna turn left, and in the front I have the store, I think. No? Yeah. So in the front I have Mandar Center in the front. Yeah, so right now I can go there. No. Okay, I will wait here, yes. I have Grace Hand Superstore here. What I have more? Zara, Sweet Cafe.
Invasion of the Donbass, and now, of course, 2022. But during all that time, Putin's now saying NATO was expanding and organised against Russia. NATO bent over backwards to not mention Russia and to point out that it remains a defensive alliance against any threat. And of course, the only time Article 5 has actually been invoked was 9/11. Which was not a Russian threat.
But just to be clear, in these military exercises, are they using Russia, the word Russia, when they talk about what the adversary is doing, or are they talking about a more fictitious country that might or might not be Russia?
Well, if you look on the website.
Yes, hello. Good afternoon. No, it's a black van. I'm on the opposite side. I can see the Enterprise van is on the Victoria Road. Oh, look, here I am, yeah. Yeah, I can come through there? Okay, good.
There is no threat as long as there is a deterrent. As long as we
Continuous
have
recording
a
will now
resolution,
start.
and we have unity, and we have
On your
military
smartphone, connect
capabilities,
to a
then there is
Wi-Fi
no
network whose
possibility
name
of
starts with
anybody
ThinkWare.
invading any of the NATO territories at all. The Article 5 guarantee makes sure that that is the case, but it's got to be credible. The deterrent has got to be realistic, and therefore it's got to be backed up by hard facts on the ground. The ammunition, the equipment, the deterrent effect of the NATO nuclear umbrella has all got to be there. That's the one way that makes sure that nobody comes and attacks us. But you know, those people in the United States who talk like that, as Lenin would say, the useful idiots like Mr. Carson, need to be reminded that they didn't think there was going to be a threat to territory of the United States of America at the beginning of September 2001. And then on the 11th of September, they were attacked and brutally attacked. So they should not assume that they are going to be inviolate. And therefore, the security that is given by the Atlantic Alliance and by the 31 countries who are in alliance with the United States of America is their best guarantee that nobody is going to attack them.
Lord Robertson, George Robertson, former NATO Secretary General there. It's now 18 minutes past 5, and Chris will give us some of the other headlines today.
Ukraine's military says it's destroyed a Russian warship in the Black Sea just off the southern coast of occupied Crimea. 3 people have been arrested in London on suspicion of insider dealing and money laundering following an investigation by the National Crime Agency and the Financial Conduct Authority. Train drivers at 5 rail operators, Chiltern, C2C, East Midlands, Northern and TransPennine Railway, have voted to continue taking strike action for another 6 months.
Thank you, Chris. Now, the home of the Conservative MP, Tobias Ellwood, was targeted by pro-Palestinian protesters on Monday. They accused him of complicity in genocide. Hands off Yemen, they were saying there. Now, police did arrive, activating Operation Bridger, which is a security scheme to protect the homes and offices of MPs. Shortly before we came on air, I spoke to Tobias Ellwood about what had happened.
Well, I got a call from the police to say that they picked up intelligence to say an event was going to take place outside of my property imminently, and I was advised, if I wasn't at the property, to stay away, which is what I did. And within minutes, over 60 demonstrators had gathered at the property. The police were mobilized very, very quickly indeed. Indeed, I cannot fault their actions. Having picked up that intelligence, they blocked my driveway, they protected my property with their vehicles, and an armed response unit was positioned around the corner. There was an understandable expectation or desire, to ask the police to tell them to disperse, given the noise, the sheer intimidation of the event, and make arrests if they didn't move on. As the police officer on duty said, that would simply inflame the situation. It's probably what the protesters wanted to do, and after about 3.5 hours, they did eventually disperse.
Just to be clear, you weren't there. There were reports that you were there with your children at the time.
No, we were advised, we were heading that way, we were advised not to go to the property itself. Arriving through that crowd certainly would have antagonized the situation.
What is the boundary between legitimate protest and intimidation, harassment?
I think that's the big question that we need to answer. All MPs expect criticism. From time to time it comes with the territory, but the bar of acceptable treatment is falling. Holding rallies outside of Parliament, outside an MP's office is one thing, but advertising the private address to mobilise an aggressive, intimidating rally at an MP's residential property, impacting not just on the family but also neighbours as well, for me is a step too far. And I do hope that anybody supporting the Palestinian cause will distance themselves from this tactic. This cannot be normalised in any way.
They say our protest was entirely legal. Is there result of constituent calls being ignored and inadequately addressed by Tobias Ellwood. Now, I have to say, it is interesting because you're not someone who seems to have taken a stridently pro-Israel position on the conflict in Gaza at all. Have you got your head around why you were targeted?
No, it's completely naive. It really is. It shows perhaps the ignorance of the people that were there, or the fact that they didn't care about what I stood for or what I've said. I've been very, very clear as a former Middle East minister. I make it my business to understand what's going on there in these difficult times. And on the one hand, I've absolutely condemned the Hamas attacks, saying that Hamas has lost any legitimate right to represent and lead the 2 million people in Gaza. And on the other, I've supported Israel's right to defend itself after those barbaric attacks on the 7th of October. But I've been highly critical of Netanyahu's leadership, which even today is absent of any strategy or clarity about what success looks like or where the utility of force is going.
I mean, it's interesting to ask why you're targeted, but you shouldn't have to justify yourself not to have dozens of protesters outside your house, chanting and with megaphones, obviously. That you're allowed to take whatever position you want, obviously. And what I guess is, what's happened to our country that this is happening? Is this a social media thing, that it's just easier to muster a posse of demonstrators? What's going on?
There's no doubt about it that the utility of the internet and IT has allowed people to rally in a way that we've not seen, let's say 30 years ago, when everything was far more organised, and therefore the police would be more aware of what's actually going on. I'm really grateful for colleagues' support from across the House, from the Chief Whip, Number 10, and there's all a sense of determination that this does need to be addressed. MPs cannot be fair game to be directly attacked in this way.
Have you spoken to your children, your family about this?
Yes, at length. They need to understand what happened. It wasn't just the family, but the entire village. This is a quiet Dorset village, unused to such activity. They've been extremely supportive, I should say, as well. But again, children growing up, why want anybody of any age to consider stepping into the public domain or politics or serving your country in some form? There's something, as I say, very, very wrong with where things are heading. This must be addressed. It must be condemned, as I say, by all those even associated with this Palestinian movement, because this cannot be desensationalized. This cannot become normality.
MP Tobias Ellwood there. Now, the BBC has had the first look at the British Museum's display of 10 gems that were recovered after being stolen from its collection. Last year, the institution revealed up to 2,000 objects from its storerooms were missing, stolen or damaged. In his first broadcast interview, the interim director, Sir Mark Jones, told the BBC's culture editor, Katie Razzle, that the recovery process was complicated, and he's admitted that care for objects in the museum's collection was missing.
What we see in this case here is 10 glass gems which we've recovered recently.
Sir Mark Jones is pointing to tiny engraved gems made of glass, stolen along with hundreds of others from the storerooms of the British Museum. These recovered gems, mostly dating back to classical times, are on display as part of a wider exhibition.